In 2012, a young couple moved into their dream home in a quiet American suburb. But what they discovered about their neighbors was something no living person should ever witness. Written by Fari0825. Michael and Sarah Patterson thought they had finally escaped the chaos of apartment life. After years of noisy neighbors, leaky ceilings, and cramped spaces, they were thrilled to buy their first home in the peaceful suburbs of Dayton, Ohio. The two-story house wasn't large, but it was theirs. A front porch, a yard for their baby Emily to grow up in, and streets lined with identical homes. It felt safe, ordinary, predictable. But the first night would change everything. As Michael unloaded boxes from the truck, Sarah caught sight of a family across the street. A man, woman, teenage boy, and a little girl stood together on their porch. They didn't wave, didn't smile. They just stared. Trying to be polite, Sarah gave a small wave. After a pause that felt far too long, the woman raised her hand stiffly, like a puppet lifted by invisible strings. That night, Sarah mentioned it to Michael. He chuckled and said, "They're probably just curious about the new folks. Don't overthink it." But Sarah couldn't shake the unease. The next morning, Sarah carried Emily outside for some fresh air. The same family was across the street. The man pushed a lawn mower that wasn't even running. The boy tossed a football into the air, over and over, never smiling. The girl sat on the steps with a doll in her lap, her eyes fixed on Sarah. Forcing herself to be friendly, Sarah walked over. The woman introduced herself in a flat, halting voice. "Hello. I'm Margaret. This is my husband Paul. Our children, David and Anna." There was something wrong with her tone, like each word was chosen carefully, unnaturally. Sarah returned inside, unsettled. "They're nice enough," she told Michael, "but something's off. Their eyes, it's like they don't blink." Michael rolled his eyes. "Babe, you just don't like awkward people. Relax." But deep down, Sarah knew it wasn't just awkwardness. That night, at exactly 2:37 a.m., Emily's cry woke Sarah. She walked into the nursery, rubbing her eyes. But when she glanced through the window, her stomach dropped. The entire neighbor family stood in the middle of the street. Perfectly still. Facing the Pattersons' house. The man clutched a rake, the boy his football, the little girl her doll. Margaret tilted her head up towards Sarah's window, eyes locking directly with hers. Sarah gasped and stumbled backward. By the time Michael rushed in, the street was empty. "You're imagining things," he whispered, pulling her close. But Sarah knew what she had seen. The following day, Sarah decided to ask around. She met an older woman at the corner house, Mrs. Whitman, who had lived there for 30 years. When Sarah mentioned the neighbors, Mrs. Whitman's face tightened. "Across the street? Honey, that house has been empty since 1998. No one's lived there for over a decade." Sarah froze. "That's impossible. I've met them. Their names are Margaret and Paul." Mrs. Whitman shook her head slowly. "I don't know who you saw, but those names. They sound familiar." That night, Sarah didn't sleep. She kept peeking through the blinds. And just after midnight, the porch across the street lit up. The family stood there again, all four of them. Smiling this time. Smiling too wide. And as Sarah watched in paralyzed horror, Margaret slowly raised her hand and waved. For days, Sarah tried convincing herself it was a trick of exhaustion. Maybe the stress of moving was making her see things. But deep down, she knew. And soon, Michael would know too. On Thursday night, just after 3 a.m., Michael woke to a faint scraping sound. Half asleep, he assumed it was a branch against the siding. But when he listened closer, the sound was rhythmic. Like fingernails. Slowly dragging across wood. He got up, pulled on a sweatshirt, and walked down the hall. The sound was coming from Emily's room. Heart pounding, he pushed the nursery door open. Emily was asleep in her crib. But when Michael looked toward the window, his stomach lurched. Anna. The little neighbor girl. She was standing outside, on the other side of the glass, her small hand pressed against it. Her doll's face was smashed flat against the pane beside her. Michael stumbled backward, shouting. By the time he rushed to the porch, the yard was empty. When Sarah saw his pale face, she whispered, "Now you believe me?" Michael didn't answer. The next day, Sarah began digging online. She searched the address of the house across the street, hoping to find a clue. And what she found made her blood run cold. In 1998, a local news site reported a tragedy. Paul and Margaret Dawson, along with their 2 children, had been found dead inside their home. Carbon monoxide poisoning. Authorities ruled it an accident from a faulty heater. But the article mentioned something strange. Neighbors at the time had insisted the family was still seen in the days after their supposed deaths. Standing on their porch. Waving. Sarah slammed the laptop shut. When Michael came home from work, she told him everything. He paced the living room, trying to stay rational. Maybe it's squatters? People messing with us? Michael, Sarah snapped, their faces. Their eyes. You saw that girl. Michael didn't argue. For the first time, he looked afraid. That night, they decided to keep every light on. Maybe it would keep the neighbors away. But at exactly 2:37 a.m., the lights flickered. Then went out. The house plunged into darkness. Emily wailed from her crib. Sarah grabbed her, clutching the child to her chest. Michael lit his phone flashlight, his hand trembling. And then, the front door creaked open. They hadn't unlocked it. From the hallway, they heard footsteps. Slow. Heavy. Deliberate. Who's there? Michael shouted, his voice cracking. No response. Only the sound of breathing, deep and ragged. The footsteps stopped at the living room doorway. And in the pale beam of the flashlight, 4 figures came into view. Paul. Margaret. David. Anna. They looked exactly the same as they had outside. But now, their skin was gray, their eyes sunken, their mouths twisted into unnatural smiles. Michael dropped the phone. Darkness swallowed them whole. When the light flickered back on for a brief second, the family was gone. But in the silence that followed, Sarah heard a whisper. Right behind her ear. Welcome, home. Sarah screamed and clutched Emily tighter, spinning around, but no one was there. Michael grabbed the flashlight off the floor, his hand shaking so badly the beam jittered across the walls. We're leaving. Now, he shouted. They rushed to the front door. But when Michael yanked it open, his stomach twisted. The street outside was gone. No road. No lawns. No other houses. Just an endless, black void stretching in every direction. And across that void, faintly glowing, stood only one house, the Dawsons. Their porch light flickering like a dying candle. Sarah choked back a sob. This can't be real. Michael tried to slam the door shut, but it resisted, as if something was pulling back. Finally, it closed with a thunderous slam that shook the entire house. Emily was crying so hard her tiny chest heaved. Sarah rocked her desperately. We can't stay here, Michael. But when they turned, the living room was no longer theirs. The wallpaper peeled in gray strips. The furniture was rotted, moldy. The air smelled like burning plastic and blood. And on the wall, written in something dark and smeared, were the words. You moved in. Now you stay. Michael stumbled back. Sarah's voice cracked. What do they want from us? From the hallway, a faint voice answered. It was a child's. Anna's. We just want friends. The lights flickered. The Dawson family appeared again. But this time, they weren't standing. They were floating, just inches off the ground, their heads tilting in unnatural angles, their eyes glowing with a faint, deathly yellow. Michael grabbed a chair and hurled it at them. It passed through their bodies like smoke. Paul Dawson stepped forward, his jaw opening wider than humanly possible. His voice was a low, guttural echo. No one leaves this house. Sarah bolted for the back door, clutching Emily. She yanked it open and ran into the night air. But when her feet hit the ground, she froze. She wasn't outside. She was back in the living room. Same peeling wallpaper. Same rotting couch. Emily wailed in her arms. Michael backed up beside her. We're trapped. The Dawson family slowly closed in. Anna dropped her doll. It hit the floor with a wet splat, its cloth body soaked in what looked like blood. Please, Sarah begged. Please, just let us go. Margaret Dawson's head tilted, her smile stretching impossibly wide. But you already belong to us. Michael and Sarah screamed as the shadows closed in. The flashlight flickered one last time, catching Emily's wide, terrified eyes, then went dark. Weeks later, the house went up for sale again. A real estate agent smiled at a young couple touring the place. It's a lovely neighborhood. Very quiet. Wonderful neighbors. Across the street, the Dawson family stood on their porch, smiling. Waving. Would you recognize, if your neighbors were never alive? Written by Fari0825.